Let's start discussing about the whole Module 1. This is the coverage for your prelim. Let's define the word church. So, we've heard this word church, but most often we define it only by its structure, the physical one, or even how we act or the practices we do inside the church. With those kind of definition we have in mind, we really need to deepen it. We have to go deeper in it by going to its etymology, the etymology of church. So where do we get this word church? So the etymology of the word church, it comes from the Greek word ekklesia. And this ekklesia is basically rooted to the term kahal, means assembly. So kahal is a Hebrew term, while ekklesia is a Greek word. So if you observe in the second slide rather, it says church is the people of God called together. So we're going to see to it or where those words coming from. But here we have already the hint of why do we have people of God called together as a definition of the word church. Because basically the Greek word ekklesia and kahal, or the Hebrew term kahal, is is the reason why we come up, or the church basically come up with the definition of this one. Church is the people of God called together. And let's try to figure it out more. Just like what we've defined recently, church means people of God called together. And that is basically the real meaning of the church, not just simply the structure or the physical one or the action, but it's basically we are the church, or the church is the people. Okay, the people. Why is it it's people? It's because those people are called to gather together for the purpose of worshiping God. Even if there is no structure of the church, the church remains forever. Why? Because um, it's not about the structure of the church nor its practices, but it's basically the people. Okay, just like in the history, the practice the church was questioned. Does 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 they does it affects their faith, or does it affect the people from worshiping God because their teachings or what they believe was questioned or even put to garbage? It wasn't, they were not affected. Um, it's because of the idea that the church doesn't only stand or doesn't only exist because of our action nor our structure. That's basically us as humans. Why? Because God called us, and it's a vocation. To be called to gather together is a vocation. So, which means for those people who belong to the church, have the vocation. God gave them the vocation. Why do they have that vocation? It's because to create a harmony or to create unity in one faith. In the recent slide, you encounter the word kahal and ecclesia. And the word kahal is a Hebrew term, and it means assembly of people, while the other one is ecclesia, which derives from the Greek word, which means called together. But remember this, the word kahal, the word ecclesia, is taken from the word kahal. It was just translated because long time ago the Bible was written in Hebrew, and people were asked to translate it into Greek so that the Romans, or the people who are Romans that believe in Jesus, they are somehow really willing to dwell on the faith and the practices, but they have to understand also the the written which has been preserved. Okay, and at the same time, it's not only for them to be able to understand, but there are other people who have a dark intention that they get they what's this They maximize or they take advantage of the translation for them to understand what is really this teaching all about, or why do people even sacrifice themselves for this kind of teaching, or for these particular people, for this particular person who is Jesus. Okay, why do people sacrifice themselves for that person, or for the teachings of this person who is dead already, which the Romans believe? Okay, so they are taking it as an vantage point to somehow to create hole or to destroy the foundation of this of their faith, especially the early Christians. That's the reason why it's not only for the Christians to understand the Hebrew written works, but for the purpose of destroying its foundation. Okay, that is why it's a no-no to translate the book, the Bible, I mean, into our mother tongue. Okay, it's really a no-no, even long time ago. But now there's so-called signs of the times. That means we really have to consider the people who believes in this particular faith, for them to understand what they are believing, uh, and in fact they should know also the foundation of it, especially its history, and especially where these principles coming from, or why this principle exists, and why is it there's such a word, church. Okay, since our topic here is the word church, uh, you have, as a Catholic, you really have to know why do we have this word church. Okay, does the word church exist in the Bible? It doesn't. Okay, remember this, there is no word church in the Bible, even if you look at it in the Old Testament, and even in the Old Testament and New Testament, there is no word, literally the word church. But you can only see the word assembly of the people, and call together. But if you're going back, or if you're going to use the old write-ups, especially the Hebrew, it's the word kahal. Okay, and in Greek it's the word ecclesia, and if it is in Latin it's the same, ecclesia, but it's only the spellings different. Okay, the word K in Greek was changed into Latin as something letter C. Okay, that's only difference, but they mean the same. Okay, so let's go back to the word, or the first etymology, which is kahal, taken from the Old Testament. It means assembly of the people. Where do we have this assembly of people? It's because of the word kahal, which is taken from the Old Testament. But remember, the Old Testament is um, it concerns about the books in the Bible. And the Old Testament has three categories, and that is the Torah, Nevi'im, or and Ketuvim, which is simply say the Tanakh in Greek word. I mean, sorry, in Hebrew term. In the word Tanakh, it means the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. So what do we mean by Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim? We will see it later on. So the next etymology, the second etymology is the Ecclesia, taken from the New Testament, and it means called together. So you, even if you visit the New Testament, you cannot see the word, literally the word church. You can only see the word called together. Okay, always remember this: assembly of people called together. They That act, or that kind of statement, it concerns about the action of God. Okay, it concerns about the action of God. It is God who called us to gather together. It is not the priest nor your companion who asked you to attend mass, or to gather as to have a worship. It is not your companion. It is basically God, and those people who were serves as an instrument of God, for you to feel that you are given the gift or the vocation to be called together. In addition to the word ecclesia, especially in the New Testament, we have this term. It's because there was a context. Okay, every translation of the Bible, okay, from Hebrew, Greek to Latin, it concerns more on the context, especially in the ecclesia, the word ecclesia. It concerns more on persecution. At the same time, the early Christians during this time were hiding. they were preaching or they were worshiping underground, but during the time without or with no persecution at all, um, they were worshiping publicly, or their worship is in public. But since there are persecution, it's massive. They really have to, of course, they are not afraid to die, but to be practical, in order to preserve the teachings, they have to survive. Okay, literally. So that means they have to hide and still continue their practices. Okay, because if all Christians will be persecuted, I think there will be no Christians at all, or there will be no Roman Catholics will exist this year 2020. Okay, but because of them, um, because God called them together, it is way of preserving this so-called worship. Okay, why they called together is because they are asked by God to ask inspiration and intervention in their life in the midst of persecution. Okay, they are called together by God, not by the person or their companion. Okay, and those people who are instruments, they are the means of communication by God. So, like what I've said, we're going to go deeper regarding about concerning about the word kahal, which is originated with the word Tanakh, the three category or classifications of the books under Old Testament. Let's start with the first one, which is the Torah, okay, the letter T, which means the law, the law of books, the books of the law. So here we have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These five books is under the Torah or the Pentateuch, which is concerning more on the law that has been given by God to Moses. And the other side is the prophets, which is basically the Ketubim, if I'm not mistaken, Ketubim. Okay, so these are the books under the Ketubim, which is considered the prophets. Okay, here, these are the prophets who prophesied that the Messiah will be coming. Okay, and in fact, these prophets, they were also considered somehow the Messiah long time ago. But the prophets would emphasize that they are not the Messiah, but rather they are the people, or they are the persons asked by God, who are called by God to do a particular mission, that is preparing the people for waiting or for the coming of the Messiah. Okay, that's the prophets, which is the Ketubim, if I'm mistaken. The next one is the Nevi'im, which is the writings. Okay, here these are the books under the writings. I think I don't have to explain much of it because you've encountered this during Read 101, if I'm not mistaken. So under the writings or the Nevi'im, it's about the Psalms, Proverbs, Job, the book of Jobs, the five rolls. There's also classifications regarding about the writings or the Nevi'im. They have three categories, which is the poetry, five rolls, and the historical. Okay, I think that's basically. I don't have to elaborate more on. But what I want to emphasize here is that all these books, it concerns or it speaks or it the word kahal, or the word kahal, which means assembly of the people, was basically taken from these books. Where do we have that? Where do we have the word kahal, or where do we have that assembly of people, which is the real definition of the church? Is because of these five books. And where these books coming from is because of the preservation of the teachings and the preservation of the writings by the traditions. There are many traditions like priestly, Elohis. Those were the traditions who preserve the writings and the teachings, and that's why we have the books. Okay, where the definition of the church was taken, originated. Just like what we talk about in the recent slides, the Catholic Church or the church means people of God called together. Okay, like I just want to emphasize that it is not the structure, the physical structure, nor the action of the people inside the church. It's more on the people of God. Okay? It's the people of God. We are the church. If you remove the two ch, the first ch in the first part of the word church and the last ch of the word church, what remains there is the letter you are. Okay, the letters you are. And that means the word church, it gives you already an obvious or literal meaning of what is really the church, and that is you are the church, we are the church. And that is why people of God, that is the church. And what's these people are being called by God to gather together, and this action and this calling of God to gather together, okay, those people have been called to gather together. It is the action of God. Okay? It is not the action, like what I've said, it is not the people who called you. Okay? It is God's action. Okay? And that is why you as a people, or you as a person, or we as a people of God, being called, we have this so-called gift or vocation. It is God's gift to us. And this gift, we have to nurture it and give it to others as well. Why? In order to create harmony and unity in faith. Just like what I've said, um, this assembly, okay, God called us, or it is the church is as an assembly of people, and it is God's calling us. This assembly is basically a faith. Okay, it's basically an assembly of faith or believers who have common denominator or common goal or common mission, and that is to create harmony, to create unity in faith. Okay, and this faith, which is caused by God's free call. Its purpose is again not only to create harmony, that is a general statement, not only to create harmony and unity, but when we create harmony and unity, we are basically sharing the divine goodness and love of Christ to our companions who have also been called to gather together. Okay, but because again, these assemblies centered in faith in Christ. Okay, and this assembly is not a forceful calling, but it is God's free call. It is us who decide to accept or to to respond to that God's free call to to assemble in one faith. Okay, why He asked us to assemble? It's because of why is it He called us to assemble? It's because He wants us to create the atmosphere of unity and harmony, and within it we are sharing His divine goodness and love of Christ. Recently, we already reached to the point of getting the real essence of the word church, and that is God called us to gather together, and that calling is God's free call. And this God's free call is our choice, or it's our freedom, the use of our freedom and free will to respond to that free calling of God. Why is it He called us? It's because in general He wants us to create or to establish harmony and unity in faith. Okay? Why? It's for the purpose of sharing His divine goodness and of course the love of Christ to to those people who have been called, and those people who have called will share the same thing to us. It's basically vice versa. And that is why the word Catholic Church is not simply, or we cannot just consider them, okay, as a social grouping, because if you consider assembly of people, you might think that it's a social grouping of people drawn together by culture, values, and attitude. But it's not. It's not a social grouping, drawn by this stuff, but rather it is God's free call. Okay? And when you say God's free call, we are considering here the vocation and gifts which is God, which is coming from God. Okay? And it is your freedom and it is our freedom to respond to that calling, whether we want to whether we want to to create harmony and unity in faith with other people. Okay? To share his divine goodness and the love of Christ. By establishing that harmony and unity, we create that kind of atmosphere of sharing the the real purpose of why God created us, and that is to share his divine goodness to one another, and also imitating Christ's way of showing love, and that is unconditional. That is why the Catholic Church, or the Church, isn't a social grouping of people drawn together by culture, values, and different attitudes, but rather the Catholic Church is not a social grouping, but rather it's God ever present source and ground for the church.
What is the church? Is the church a building? Is the church a pastor? Or the staff? Is the church the music? The tradition? Or the ministries? These are all good things, but they are not the church. Take them away, and the church is still here. Why? Because you are still here. The church is you. The church is you with a purpose. The church is you on a mission. The church is you with a plan. A simple plan to plug into God at a weekend service, to charge up in a small group community, to live out using your gifts and passions, and to pass on your faith to those who do not know Christ. When you and I live like this, all the things we used to do in church become things we do as the church. God desires it. The world needs it. And we are called to be it. What is the church? The church is you.